Never was I more conflicted to go and see a show than when I went to see MJ the Musical, which is a story about Michael Jackson's life and art. The reasons for this being a conflicting piece is obviously controversy surrounding Michael Jackson's life and things that have unfolded since he has passed away, but also there is that undeniable truth that the impact that he has had on pop music and the people around the world still remains. His music is still some of the most beloved. His songs are some of the classics that you sing and dance to this date. So the experience of this musicals, and if you like it or not, will largely depend on the fact if you can separate artist from the art or if that connection is still there for you. Hence, it makes things a little bit more complicated. In this video, I'm going to dive into 3 reservations that I had about this musical and how this piece has addressed it or not, and tell you if this musical is worth seeing if you are coming to visit London or New York, because currently it is on in both cities. My name is Christina and I love going to theater, and this year I'm on a mission to see 52 shows, which approximately means 1 show a week. So if you would like to hear my reviews as well as tips on how to secure cheap tickets and other things about London, then make sure to subscribe. Before I dive into my opinion about this musical, I think it's worth noting what the actual storyline is about. And while we know it is about Michael Jackson's life, it is not about a whole of its life. It is about a particular moment in time when he was preparing for 1992 Dangerous World Tour, and it follows rehearsals, what happens in rehearsal rooms, and also through that there are some like flashbacks to his previous experiences and just things that kind of have shaped him to be who he is. And throughout this there are songs and performances that are very memorable, but generally that is the gist of the story. That is kind of like the storyline as it's set. MG the Musical was scheduled to premiere in 2020 on Broadway, however that did not happen and it was postponed until 2022 when it premiered in New York, and then it came to London in 2024 in March. So it's still kind of fresh musical for London audiences. However, it has been very acclaimed in New York. It got nominated for 10 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, and it has received, I believe, 4 or 5, including Best Lead Actor, Best Choreography, Best Lighting Design, and Best Sound Design. So there are quite a lot of accolades that this musical has already gathered. What's not to like about this musical, you may ask? I'm going to dive into 3 things that have been really big factors in me deciding if I like or not this musical. And firstly, it is the whole controversy surrounding Michael Jackson's life, especially sexual allegations that came to life in the past decade or so. And this is something that cannot really be completely neglected. Obviously, from the perspective of creators of this musical, they really wanted to put the attention onto him as an artist, his dedication to the craft, his dedication to the songs, and how much he's felt music in every single bone of his body in terms of the dance and performances, and how impeccable his attention to detail has been. However, this approach is really removing a whole level of depth of discussing him as a person, because obviously he hasn't just been this artist, he's also had demons and also moments of incredible stardom. So like, he is a very complex personality, and I think that by completely removing this part of his life, it is really hard to actually resonate with the story to the level of actually understanding and knowing this person and artist. But obviously it was a very clever choice, if we can say so, because removing the controversy from the story really opens this to fans, and it makes it a really light, to a degree, entertainment that everyone can enjoy. And it is mainly aimed at people who like Michael Jackson and who are there to hear the songs. But there is that just moral dilemma and controversy, because ultimately this is a musical that is approved by Michael Jackson's estate, and the sales of it are contributing to him, his family, and everyone who has been associated with him. So there's just that bigger context around this musical that really made me uneasy going to see it. I really wanted to see if I can distance myself from it, and quite honestly I think that I wasn't really able to, because it just felt that there is this thing like a looming presence that hasn't been addressed in any way. On the other hand, they include quite a lot of details about his childhood and upbringing, and really they try to portray his father as the person who has in a way made him the way that he is when it comes to that perfectionism, and also a lot of fears that he's had and a lot of anxiety that he has had because his father has been an abusive figure in his life, and also growing up with his brothers and the Jackson 5 and everything. Those are the elements that have been discussed in a way to help us understand what has shaped Michael to become who he was. The second thing that is a little bit less controversial controversial, but is always a consideration when it comes to jukebox musicals talking about a big artist, is how to weave in the songs into the narrative. And I have seen a fair share of jukebox musicals myself, such as *And Juliet*, *Mamma Mia*, *Moulin Rouge*, *Tina Turner the Musical*, and all of this succeeded in weaving these songs into a certain degree, some better than the others. So this was again one more test for this musical, for MJ the Musical, to see if they have managed to weave this into the narrative in a better, worse, or just an average way. And when it comes to this musical, I think it is really tricky to distinguish between the musical and almost something that is similar to a tribute concert, because ultimately it is a preparation for the tour, and I think it is a clever choice, but it's also a choice that really positions these songs as part of the narrative in terms of the set list. And as they are rehearsing different things, then they're singing that particular song, and then they kind of, do the big spectacle, and then they go back into the rehearsal room, and then you're kind of like back to reality. So it is a smart choice, but maybe a slightly easier one compared to some other musicals that really managed to weave these into the bigger narrative. This is not to say that MJ the Musical doesn't have those elements as well. There were some really heartfelt songs sang between father and Michael Jackson, or mother Michael Jackson. So there were a few of those moments that really gave you goosebumps and where the story really resonated, especially with Michael from the past. On the flip side, this being a jukebox musical means that you can really put as many of the amazing Michael Jackson's hits in it and give the audiences an opportunity to see them come to life in this amazing musical theater way, with great set and costume designs and amazing choreographies. And they really delivered for some of the numbers, especially Thriller. That was the most amazing number. It was so theatrical. They changed into the costumes and they did the whole choreography, and it looked spectacular. Obviously, this is not the only one. The Man in the Mirror at the end just like made people cry, like many other songs. And this is where really jukebox musicals have something that original musicals will never have, and that is the already existing audience who adores these songs. It was almost hard not to sing or dance when you hear Beat It or Billie Jean or Smooth Criminal. All these songs are just so ingrained in our memory and in our bones, so you just want to dance, you just feel this music. There was some really cool elements when they talked about creation of the music and how he feels the music and how he hears all these like different sounds, and then they kind of created it on stage, and it was really great. So if Michael Jackson's legacy in terms of the music is something that you really love and respect, then this musical really delivers in terms of seeing these songs come to life in a way that probably you'll never be able to see. The third big consideration when it comes to seeing a musical like MJ the Musical is, can the lead live up to the task? This is really the biggest question, because if you don't have a good lead who's going to bring Michael Jackson to life, then what are we talking about? This musical is doomed. And luckily, MJ the Musical has the best star of them all, Miles Frost, who has originated this role on Broadway and then transferred with the show to the West End. And now London audiences have an opportunity to see his amazing Tony Award winning performance. It is an incredible moment when you are witnessing him on stage and really sometimes thinking, is this MJ or am I imagining things? Like, it is so good. His mannerisms, his voice, his singing, his dancing, his posture, it is so good and so believable that honestly, just like going to see the show for Miles himself is worth it. While Miles definitely steals the show, the cast of this musical is pretty good. There are also quite a few little Michaels and also Michael throughout ages, and all of these leads were great, really resonating with that emotional side of things and complexity of Michael Jackson's character. So I think that this is probably the strongest part of this show, and rightly so. It is a story about Michael Jackson, so who is it going to be the star of the show if not people who are portraying his character? So I think if you are on the fence, if you're going to see the show because you're not really sure that anyone can live up to filling out these biggest shoes possible, which is Michael Jackson's shoes, then I think Miles Frost is definitely a person worth checking out, and going to see a performance with him is something that you won't regret. So with all these things considered, what is my final take on MJ the Musical? I think that this musical will definitely find its way to the right audiences. MJ's fan base is huge, and there are so many people who just cannot deny the fact that he was a musical genius. And his amazing music and songs, when you hear them and when you see them live and when you see an amazing actor portraying his character and telling the story of his life, then the question is really, what's not to like about it? So from that perspective, I really see why this is one of the biggest grossing musicals in the recent history and why it is so popular popular and why there are so many people who just want to go and see it. It's a great entertainment, especially if you're visiting London and you want to hear something familiar and just like enjoy the West End, then this is a great musical to go and see. However, once we move past that superficial level of just admiring his artistry and music and we dig a little bit deeper, this musical doesn't really deliver on the storyline of his life, on the complexity of his character, and it doesn't make you feel closer to it. With MJ the musical, because of the whole controversy thing being very much omitted, it just feels that you're getting this like censored version of his life and just we're like, no, we're not talking about that. And that is really hard to ignore, and it is really hard to completely forget that that is the way that things are. I think that there are two camps of people, some who are gonna love this musical and some who are gonna be very conflicted or actually just like refuse to go and see it because of everything. So I think that I'm probably leaning towards the second camp, and I would give this show about 2 to 3 stars. I think it is a bit harsh for me to say that this is not a good show. It is a good entertainment, but again, it is more that I don't feel that maybe the story delivered to the extent that I think it could. If you would like to go and see MJ the musical, then you can do so until April 2025 in both New York and London. It might get extended, I don't have a confirmation of that, but there are lots of good seats and cheap tickets going around, and the theater in London at least, like it's pretty big, so you can find some really good deals. If you're into Jukebox musicals, then I definitely recommend you check out Tina, the Tina Turner musical, as well as Mamma Mia, which is one of the most famous Jukebox musicals, and see if you maybe like one of those.